Okay, by this time tomorrow, I will have finished reading Ender's Game. All right, that's basically what the goal is here. Um, Nothing will get in the way, not even people, especially not people. This is a fantastic novel. All right, and I think everyone that's going into the military or really into government or really any leadership position should read it. When I went to training, I'm telling you, the feeling that this book gives you, that big takeaway, is the big takeaway from actual like American training. Okay, and without further ado, Ender's Game. I've watched through his eyes, I've listened through his ears, and I tell you, he's the one, or at least as close as we're gonna get. That's what you said about the brother. The brother tested out impossible for other reasons. Nothing we can do with his ability. Same with the sister. There are doubts about him. He's too malleable, too willing to submerge himself in someone else's will. Not if the other person is his enemy. So, what do we do? Surround him with enemies all the time? If we have to. I thought you said you liked this kid. If the buggers get him, they'll make me look like his favorite uncle. All right. We're saving the world after all. Take him. The monitor lady smiled very nicely and tousled his hair and said, Andrew, I suppose by now you're just absolutely sick of having that horrid monitor. Well, I have good news for you. That monitor is going to come out today. We're going to take it out, right out, and it won't hurt a bit. Ender nodded. It was a lie, of course, that it wouldn't hurt a bit. But since adults always said it when it was going to hurt, you could count on that statement as an accurate prediction of the future. Sometimes lies were more dependable than the truth. So, if you'll just come over here, Andrew, just sit right here in the examining table. The doctor will be in to see you in a moment. The monitor gone. Ender tried to imagine the little device missing from the back of his neck. I'll roll over my back in bed, and it won't be pressing there. I won't feel it tingling and taking up the heat when I shower. And Peter won't hate me anymore. I'll come home and show him that the monitor's gone, and he'll see that I didn't make it either. That I'll just be a normal kid now, like him. That wouldn't be so bad. He'll forgive me that I had my monitor a whole year longer than he had his. We'll be not friends, probably. No, Peter was too dangerous. Peter got so angry. Brothers, though. Not enemies, not friends, but brothers. Able to live in the same house. He won't hate me. He'll just leave me alone. And when he wants to play buggers and astronauts, maybe I won't have to play. Maybe I can just go read a book. But Ender knew, even as he thought it, that Peter wouldn't leave him alone. There was something in Peter's eyes when he was in his mad mood. And whenever Ender saw that look, that glint, he knew the one thing Peter would not do was leave him alone. I'm practicing piano, Ender. Come turn the pages for me. Oh, is the monitor boy too busy to help his brother? Is he too smart? Got to go kill some buggers, astronaut? No, no, I don't want your help. I can do it on my own, you little bastard. You little third. This won't take long, Andrew, said the doctor. Ender nodded. It's designed to be removed, without infection, without damage. There'll be some tickling, and some people say they have a feeling of something missing. You'll keep looking around for something you were looking for, but you can't find it, and you won't remember what it was. So I'll tell you, It's the monitor you're looking for, and it isn't there. In a few days, that feeling will pass. The doctor was twisting something at the back of Ender's head. Suddenly, a pain stabbed through him like a needle from his neck to his groin. Ender felt his back spasm, and his body arced violently backwards. His head struck the bed. He could feel his legs thrashing, and his hands were clenching each other, wriggling each other so tightly that they ached. Dee Dee, shouted the doctor, I need you. The nurse ran in, gasped. Got to relax these muscles. Get it to me now. What are you waiting for? Something changed hands. Ender could not see. He lurched to one side and fell off the examining table. Catch him! Just hold him steady. You hold him, doctor. He's too strong for me. Not the whole thing. You'll stop his heart. Ender felt a needle enter his back, just above the neck of his shirt. It burned. But wherever in him the fire spread, his muscles gradually unclenched. Now he could cry for the fear and pain of it. Are you all right, Andrew? The nurse asked. Andrew could not remember how to speak. They lifted him onto the table. They checked his pulse, did other things. He did not understand at all. The doctor was trembling, his voice as he shook. They leave these things in kids for 3 years. What do they expect? We could have switched him off. Do you realize that? We could have unplugged his brain for all that time. When does the drug wear off? Asked the nurse. We'll keep him here at least an hour and watch him. If he doesn't start talking in 15 minutes, call me. Could have unplugged him forever. I don't have the brains of a bugger. He got back to Miss Pumphrey's class only 15 minutes before closing bell. He was still a little unsteady on his feet. Are you all right, Andrew? Asked Miss Pumphrey. He nodded. Were you ill? He shook his head. You don't look so well. I'm okay. You better sit down, Andrew. He stared toward his seat, but stopped. Now what was I looking for? I can't think what I was looking for. Your seat is over there, said Miss Pumphrey. He sat down, but it was something else he needed, something he had lost. I'll find it later. Your monitor, whispered the girl behind him. Andrew shrugged. His monitor, she whispered to the others. Andrew reached up and felt his neck. There was a band-aid. It was gone. He felt like everyone else now. Washed out, Andy? Asked the boy who sat across the aisle and behind him. Couldn't think of his name. Peter? No, that was someone else. Quiet, Mr. Stilton, said Mrs. Pumphrey. Stilton smirked. Miss Pumphrey talked about multiplication. Ender dawdled on his desk, drawing contour maps of mountainous islands, and then telling his desk to display them in 3 dimensions from every angle. The teacher would know, of course, that he wasn't paying attention. But she wouldn't bother him, and he always knew the answer, even when she thought he wasn't paying attention. In the corner of his desk, a word appeared and began marching across the perimeter of the desk. It was an upside down, and then it was backwards at first. But Ender knew what it said long before it reached the bottom of the desk and turned right side up. Ender smiled. He was the one who figured out how to send messages and make them march, even as his secret enemy called him names. The method of delivery praised him. It was not his fault he was a third. It was the government's idea. They were the ones who authorized it. How else could a third like Ender have gotten into school? And now the monitor was gone. The experiment entitled Andrew Wiggin hadn't worked out at all. If they could, he was sure they would like to rescind the waivers that would allow him to be born at all. Didn't work, so erase the experiment. The bell rang. Everyone sighed off their desks or hurried or hurried or hurriedly typed in reminders to themselves. Some were dumping lessons or data into their computers at home. A few gathered out the printers while something they wanted to show was printed out. Ender spread his hands over the child-sized keyboard near the edge of the desk and wondered what it would feel like to have hands as large as the grown-ups. They must feel so big and awkward. Thick, stubby fingers and beefy palms, of course. They had bigger keyboards. But how could their thick fingers draw a fine line the way Ender could? A line so precise he couldn't make it. He could make it spiral 79 times from the center of the edge of the desk, without the lines ever touching or overlapping. It gave him something to do while the teacher droned on about arithmetic. Arithmetic! Valentine had taught him arithmetic when he was 3. Are you all right, Andrew? Yes, ma'am. You'll miss the bus. Ender nodded and got up. The other kids were gone. They would be waiting, though, the bad ones. His monitor wasn't perched on his neck, hearing what he heard and seeing what he saw. They could say what they liked. They might even hit him now. No one else could see them anymore, and so no one else would come to Ender's rescue. There were advantages to the monitor, and he would miss them. It was Stiltson, of course. He wasn't bigger than most other kids, but he was bigger than Ender, and he had some others with him. He always did. Hey, Third. Don't answer. Nothing to say. Hey, Third, we're talking to you. Third. Hey, Bugger Lover, we're talking to you. Can't think of anything else to answer. Anything I say will make it worse. So, saying nothing. Soul saying nothing. Hey, Third. Hey, Turd, you flunked out, huh? Thought you were better than us. But you lost your little birdie. Third, he got a Band-Aid on your neck. Are you going to let me through? Ender asked. Are we going to let him through? Should we let him through? They all laughed. Sure, we'll let you through. First, we'll let your arm through, then your butt through, then maybe a piece of your knee. The others chimed in low. Lost your birdie, 30. Lost your birdie, 30. Stiltson began pushing him with one hand. Someone behind him then pushed him towards Stiltson. Seesaw, Marjorie draw, someone said. Tennis. Ping pong. This would not have a happy ending, so Ender decided that he'd rather not be the unhappiest at the end. The next time Stiltson's arm came to push him, Ender grabbed it. He missed. Gonna fight me, huh? Gonna fight me, 30? The people behind Ender grabbed him to hold him. Ender did not feel like laughing, but he laughed. You mean it takes this many of you to fight 1/3? We're people, not thirds, turd face. You're about as strong as a fart. But they let go of him. As soon as they did, Ender kicked out high and hard, catching Stiltson square in the breastbone. He dropped. It took Ender by surprise. He hadn't thought to put Stiltson on the ground with one kick. It didn't occur to him that Stiltson didn't take a fight like this seriously, that he wasn't prepared for a truly desperate blow. For a moment, the others backed away, and Stiltson lay motionless. They were all wondering if he was dead. Ender, however, was trying to figure out a way to forestall vengeance. He kept them from taking him in a pack tomorrow. I'll have to win this now, and for all time. We'll all fight it every day, and it'll get worse and worse. Ender knew the unspoken rules of manly warfare. Even though he was only 6, it was forbidden to strike the opponent who lay hapless on the ground. Only an animal would do that. So Ender walked to Stiltson's supine body and kicked him again, viciously in the ribs. Stiltson groaned and rolled away from him. Ender walked around and kicked him again in the crotch. Stiltson would not make a sound. He only doubled up, and tears streamed out of his eyes. Ender looked at the others coldly. You might be having some idea of ganging up on me. You could probably beat me up pretty bad, but just remember what I do to people that hurt me. From then on, you'd be wondering when I'd get you and how bad it would be. He kicked Stiltz in the face. Blood from his nose spattered the ground. It wouldn't be this bad. It would be worse. He turned and walked away. Nobody followed him. He turned a corner into the corridor leading to the bus stop. He could hear the boys behind him saying, Geez, look at him. He's wasted. Ender leaned his head against the wall of the corridor and cried until the bus came. It was just like Peter. Take my monitor away, and I am just like Peter. Um, I guess without my rose tinted glasses. Well, first of all, I didn't really realize the dystopian themes of the opening of the novel. So, I mean, now that I'm making connections here, it seems pretty crucial. These dystopian themes seem pretty crucial. Yeah, I'd probably change the bully dialogue. Um, I mean, third and third, I guess it's there, but I just look. The thing is bullies think really meta, and there's like a certain like poetry that they can inspire, and I just feel like he's not doing the bullies enough credit. I think I don't know. I'll have to figure out some derogatory term I would use for a third. I think basically it's there's some sort of breeding policy that has to do with the selection process. Yeah, I'm getting definitely some power trips like Hunger Games, Harry Potter stuff, but I guess that's just the genre. It's well written though. I'm glad I'm really delighted with how well written it is. It's well written, and I like that. It's easy to read. Sometimes I stumble, but it's enough to keep going. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess look, the big thing here, right? The big takeaway here is Harry Potter is just magic, right? Like Harry, you're magic, and everyone's like Harry Potter's magic, and in Hunger Games is like she's 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 bow and arrow. She does the bow and the right, but that's like the whole thing, right? I mean, they're really good at everything, but it's like okay, he's got the magic. But look, Ender has his brain. I guess that's why I like this book so much. Is it teaches you? It's like yeah, that's his power, but I mean, he walks you through it. So when he walks you through it, basically. Oh, his power is your power. Okay. All right, it's off. How's he doing? You live in somebody's body for a few years, you get used to it. I look at his face now. I can't tell what's going on. I'm not used to seeing his facial expressions. I'm used to feeling them. Come on. We're not talking about psychoanalysis here. We're soldiers, not witch doctors. You just saw him beat the guts out of the leader of a gang. He was thorough. He didn't just beat him, he beat him deep. Like Mazarakam, he had to spare me. So, in the judgment of the committee, he passes. Mostly. Let's see what he does with his brother, now that the monitor's off. His brother? Aren't you afraid of what his brother will do to him? You were the one that told me that this wasn't a no risk business. I went back through some of the tapes. I can't help it. I like the kid. I think we're going to screw him up. Of course we are. It's our job. We're the Wicked Witch. We promise gingerbread. But we eat the little bastard alive. I'm sorry, Ender. Valentine replied. Valentine. She was looking at the band-aid on his neck. Ender touched the wall, and the door closed behind him. I don't care. I'm glad it's gone. What's gone? Peter walked in the parlor, chewing on a mouthful of bread and peanut butter. Ender did not see Peter as the beautiful 10-year-old boy the grown-ups saw, with dark, thick, tousled hair, and a face that could have belonged to Alexander the Great. Ender looked at Peter, only to detect anger or boredom, the dangerous moods that always led to pain. Now, as Peter's eyes discovered the band-aid on his neck, the telltale flicker of anger appeared too. Valentine saw it. Now he's like us, she said, trying to soothe him before he had time to strike. But Peter would not be soothed. Like us? He keeps the little sucker till he's 6 years old? When did you lose yours? You were 3. I lost mine before I was 5. He almost made it, little bastard. Little bugger. This is all right, Ender thought. Talk and talk. Talk. Go ahead, talk is fine. Well, now your guardian angels aren't watching over you, Peter said. Now they aren't checking to see if you feel pain, listening to hear what I'm saying, seeing what I'm doing to you. How about that? How about it? Peter shrugged. Suddenly Peter smiled and clapped his hands together in a mockery of good cheer. Let's play buggers and astronauts, he said. Where's Mom? Asked Valentine. Out, said Peter. I'm in charge. I think I'll call Daddy. Call away, said Peter. You know he's never in. I'll play, said Ender. You can be the bugger, said Peter. Let him be the astronaut for once, Valentine said. Keep your fat face out of it, fart mouth, said Peter. Come on upstairs and choose your weapons. It would not be a good game, Ender knew. It was not a question of winning. When kids played in the corridors, whole troops of them, the buggers never won. And sometimes the games got mean. But here in their flat, the game would start mean. And the bugger wouldn't just go empty and quit the way buggers did in the real wars. The bugger was in it until the astronaut decided it was over. Peter opened his bottom drawer and took out the bugger mask. Mother had got upset when Peter bought it. But Dad pointed out the war wouldn't just go away because you hid bugger masks and wouldn't let your kids play with make-believe laser guns. Better to play the war games and have a better chance of surviving when the buggers came again. If I can survive the games, thought Ender. He put on the mask. It closed behind him like a hand pressed tight against his face. But this isn't how it feels to be a bugger, thought Ender. They don't wear this face like a mask. It is their face. On their home worlds, do the buggers put on human masks and play? And what do they call us? Slimies? Because we're so soft and oily compared to them? Watch out, Slimy, Ender said. He could barely see Peter through the eye holes. Peter smiled at him. Slimy, huh? Well, Bugger Wugger, let's see how to break that face of yours. Ender couldn't see it coming, except a slight shift of Peter's weight. The mask cut out his peripheral vision. Suddenly, there was pain and pressure of a blow on the side of his head. He lost balance and fell that way. Don't see you too well, do you, Bugger? Said Peter. Ender began to take off the mask. Peter put his toe against Ender's groin. Don't take off the mask, said Peter. Ender pulled the mask down into place and took his hands away. Peter pressed with his foot. Pain shot through Ender. He doubled up. Lie flat, Bugger. We're going to vivisect you. At long last, we've got one of you alive, and we're going to see how you work. Peter, stop it, Ender said. Peter, stop it. Very good. So you buggers can guess our names. You can make yourself sound like pathetic, cute little children, so we'll love you and be nice to you. But it doesn't work. I can see you for what you really are. They meant you to be human, little third, but you're really a bugger, and now it shows. He lifted his foot, took a step, and then knelt on Ender. His face pressed against Ender's belly, just below the breastbone. He put more and more of his weight on Ender. It became hard to breathe. I could kill you like this, whispered Peter. Just press and press until you're dead. And I could say that I didn't know it would hurt you, that we were just playing. And they'd believe me. And everything would be fine. And you'd be dead. Everything would be fine. Ender could not speak. The breath was being forced from his lungs. Peter might mean it. Probably didn't mean it, but he might. I do mean it, Peter said. Whatever you think, I mean it. They only authorized you because I was promising. But I didn't pan out. You did better. They think you're better. But I don't want a better little brother, Ender. I don't want a third. I'll tell, Valentine said from the doorway. No one will believe you. They'd believe me. Then you're dead too, sweet little sister. Oh, yes, said Valentine. They'll believe that. I didn't know I would kill Andrew. And when he was dead, I didn't know I would kill Valentine too. The pressure let up a little. So not today. But someday you two won't be together. And then there'll be an accident. You're all talk, Valentine said. You don't mean any of it. I don't? And you don't know why you don't mean it, Valentine asked. Because you want to be in government someday. You want to be elected. And they won't elect you if your opponents can dig up the fact that your brother and sister both died in suspicious accidents when they were little. Especially because of the letter I put in my secret file in the city library, which will be open in the event of my death. Don't give me that kind of crap, Peter said. It says I didn't die a natural death. Peter killed me. And if he hasn't already killed Andrew, he will soon. Not enough to convict you, but enough to keep you from getting elected. You're his monitor now, said Peter. You better watch him day and night. You better be there. Ender and I aren't stupid. We scored as well as you did on everything. Better on some things. We're all such wonderfully bright children. You're not the smartest, Peter. You're just the biggest. Oh, I know. There'll be a day when you aren't there with him, when you forget. And suddenly you'll remember, and you'll rush to him, and there he'll be, perfectly all right. And the next time you won't worry so much, and you won't come so fast. And every time he'll be all right, and you'll think that I just forgot. Even though you'll remember that I said this, you'll think that I forgot. And years will pass, and there'll be a terrible accident, and I'll find his body. And I'll cry over him. And you'll remember this little conversation, Valley. But you'll be ashamed for remembering, because you'll know that I changed. that it really was an accident, that it's just cruel of you even to remember what I said in a childhood quarrel. Except that it'll be true. I'm going to save this up, and he's going to die, and you won't do a thing. Not a thing, but go on believing that I'm just the biggest. The biggest a-hole, Valentine said. Peter leaped to his feet and started for her, but she shied away, and her pried off his mask. Peter flopped back on his bed and started to laugh, loud, but with real mirth, tears coming from his eyes. Oh, you guys are just super. Just the biggest suckers on planet Earth. Now he's going to tell us it was all just a joke, Valentine said. Not a joke, a game. I can make you guys believe anything. I can make you dance around like puppets. In a phony monster voice, he said, I'm gonna kill you and chop you into little pieces and put you in the garbage hole. He laughed again. Biggest suckers in the solar system. Ender stood there, watching him laugh, and thought of Stilson, thought of how it felt to crunch into his body. This is who needed it. This is who should have got it. As if she could read his mind, Valentine whispered, No, Ender. Peter suddenly rolled to his side, flipped off the bed, and got into position for a fight. Oh, yes, Ender, he said. Any time, Ender. Valentine lifted his right leg and shook his shoe. He held it up. See there on the toe? That's blood, Peter. It's not mine. Ooh, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. Ender squished up a cap tiller, and now he's gonna squish me. There was no getting to him. Peter was a murderer at heart, and nobody knew it but Valentine and Ender. Mother came home and commiserated with Ender about the monitor. Father came home and kept saying it was such a wonderful surprise that they had fantastic children that the government told them, well, they could have 3, and now the government didn't want to take any of them after all. So here they were with 3, and they still had a third, until Ender wanted to scream at him, I know I'm a third. I know it. If you want, I'll go away, so you don't have to be embarrassed in front of everybody. I'm sorry I lost the monitor. Now that you have 3 kids, and no obvious explanation, not so convenient for you. I'm so sorry. He lay in bed, staring upward in the darkness. On the bunk above him, he could hear Peter turning and tossing restlessly. Then Peter slid off the bunk and walked out of the room. Ender heard the hushing sound of the toilet cleaning, and Peter stood silhouetted in the doorway. He thinks I'm asleep. He's going to kill me. Peter walked to the bed, and sure enough, he did not lift himself up to his bed. Instead, he came and stood by Ender's head. He did not reach for a pillow to smother Ender. He did not have a weapon. He whispered, Ender, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know how it feels. I'm sorry. I'm your brother. I love you. A long time later, Peter's even breathing said he was asleep. Ender peeled the band-aid from his neck, and the second time that day he cried. The sister is our weak link. He really loves her. I know. She can do it all from the start. He won't want to leave her. So what are you going to do? Persuade him that he wants to come with us more than he wants to stay with her. How will you do that? I'll lie to him. And if that doesn't work, then I'll tell the truth. We're allowed to do that in emergencies. We can't plan for everything, you know. I guess, yeah, this book definitely plays into that like childish, foolish notion that the government's the adults. Well, yeah, I mean that's basically what I'm TLDRing right now. The adults all have some whimsical plan, right? I mean, the thing is, right, is adults don't really exactly have a plan. Now that I'm an adult, I don't know, probably projecting here, but they can think. They understand that there is a future. They can think beyond the next 15 minutes. They have the capacity to do so. If they do it, that's another story, okay? But this definitely gets into that, and I could see how that in itself is a dystopian theme because, I mean, I don't know. The thing about dystopia is you live it, and there are so many people that are just so happy and so just like beneficent that there must be a plan. They just go along with it. Something I really like about this book is the war against the buggers. It is a losing affair. They make it seem like everything's hunky dory, but in actuality, it's very bad, very very bad, very 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 bad, and so that's why they're doing all these dystopian things, all these dystopian maneuvers. A lot of like there, maybe I kind of like just it might be easier for me to visualize it when it's on the paper, but Ender's little desk has like a three-dimensional display. It's a little like it's so abstractly explained that I'm sure something similarly will be of that caliber will be developed along those lines before long. Let's get through the exposition. I'm on a mission to get through the exposition. Ender wasn't very hungry during breakfast. He kept wondering what it would be like at school. Facing Stilson after yesterday's fight. What Stilson's friends would do. Probably nothing. But he couldn't be sure. He didn't want to go. You're not eating, Andrew said. Andrew's mother said. Peter came into the room. Morning, Ender. Thanks for leaving your slimy washcloth in the middle of the shower. Just for you, Ender murmured. Andrew, you have to eat. Ender held out his wrists, a gesture that said, "So feed it to me through a needle." Very funny, Mother said. I'll try to be concerned, but it makes no difference to my genius children. It was all your genes that made us geniuses, Mom, said Peter. We sure didn't get any from Dad. I heard that, Father said, not looking up from the news that was being displayed at the table that they ate from. It wouldn't be wasted if you hadn't. The table beeped. Someone was at the door. Who is it? Mother asked. Father thumbed a key, and a man appeared on his video. He was wearing the only military uniform that meant anything anymore. The IF, the International Fleet. I thought it was over, said Father. Peter said nothing, just poured milk over his cereal. And Ender thought, maybe I don't have to go to school today after all. Father coated the door open and got up from the table. I'll see to it, he said. Stay neat. They stayed, but they didn't eat. A few moments later, Father came back in the room and beckoned to Mother. You're in it, said Peter. They found out what you did to that kid at school, and now they're going to make you do some time in the belt. I'm only 6, moron. I'm a juvenile. You're a third. You have no rights. Valentine came in, her hair in a sleepy halo around her face. Where's Mom and Dad? I'm too sick to go to school. Another oral exam, huh? Said Peter. Shut up, Peter, said Valentine. You should relax and enjoy it, said Peter. It could be worse. I don't know how. It... Instinctively, she looked at Ender. After all, for years, they had expected someone to come and tell them what Ender had passed, that Ender had needed. That's right, look at him, Peter said. But it might be me, you know. They might have realized I was the best of the lot after all. Peter's feelings were hurt, and so he was being a snot as usual. The door opened. Ender, said Father, you better come in here. Sorry, Peter, Valentine taunted. Father glowered. Children, this is no laughing matter. Ender followed Father into the parlor. The IF officer rose to his feet when they entered, but he did not extend a hand to Ender. Mother was twisting her wedding band on her fingers. Andrew, she said, I never thought you were the kind to get in a fight. The Stilson boy's in the hospital, Father said. You really did a number on him. With your shoe, Ender? That wasn't exactly fair. Ender shook his head. He had expected someone from school to come about Stilson, not an officer of the fleet. This was more serious than he thought. And yet, he couldn't think what else he could have done. Do you have any explanation for your behavior, young man? Asked the officer. Ender shook his head. He didn't know what to say. He was afraid to reveal himself to be any more monstrous than his actions had made him out to be. I'll take it, whatever the punishment is, he thought. Let's get this over with. We're willing to consider extenuating circumstances, the officer said. But I must tell you, it doesn't look good. Kicking him in the groin, kicking him repeatedly in the face and body while he was down. It looks like you really enjoyed it. I didn't, whispered Ender. Then why did you do it? He had his gang there. So? This excuses anything? No. Then tell me why you kept kicking him. You had already won. Knocking him down won the fight. I wanted to win all the next ones too. So they'd leave me alone. Ender couldn't help it. He was too afraid, too ashamed of his own acts. When he tried not to, he cried again. Ender did not like to cry, and rarely did. In less than a day, he had done it 3 times, and each time it was worse. The cry in front of his mother and father and this military man, that was shameful. You took away the monitor, Ender said. I had to take care of myself, didn't I? Ender, you should have asked a grown-up for help, Father began. But the officer stood up and stepped across the room to Ender. He held out his hand. My name is Graff, Ender. Colonel Hiram Graff. I'm director of primary training at Battle School in the Belt. I've come to invite you to enter the school. After all, but the monitor. The final step in your testing was to see what would happen when the monitor was off. We don't always do it that way, but in your case... And he passed? Mother was incredulous. Putting the Stilson boy in the hospital? What would you have done if Andrew had gotten killed? Given him a medal? It isn't what he did, Mrs. Wiggin. It's why. Colonel Graff handed a folder full of papers. Here are the requisitions. Your son has been cleared by the IF Selective Service. Of course, we already have your consent, granted in writing in time of the conception that he was confirmed. Or he would not have been born. He has been hours from then, if he qualified. Father's voice was trembling as he spoke. It's not very kind of you to let us think you didn't want him, and then to take him after all. And the charade about the Stilson boy, Mother said. It wasn't a charade, Mrs. Wiggin. Until we knew what Ender's motivation was, we couldn't be sure that he wasn't another. We had to know what the action meant, or at least what Ender believed it meant. Must you call him that stupid nickname? Mother began to cry. It's the name he calls himself. What are you going to do, Colonel Graff? Father asked. Walk out the door with him now? That depends, said Graff. On what? On whether Ender wants to come. Mother's weeping turned to bitter laughter. Oh, so it's voluntary after all. How sweet. For the two of you, the choice was made when Ender was conceived. But for Ender, the choice has not been made at all. Conscripts make good cannon fodder, but for officers, we need volunteers. Officers? Ender asked. At the sound of his voice, the others fell silent. Yes, said Graff. Battle school is for training future starship captains and commodores of flotillas and admirals of the fleet. Let's not have any deception here, Father said angrily. How many of the boys at the battle school actually end up in command of ships? Unfortunately, Mr. Wiggin, that is classified information. But I can say that none of our boys who make it through the first year has ever failed to receive a commission as an officer. And none has retired from a position of lower rank than chief executive officer of an interplanetary vessel. Even in the domestic defense forces within our own solar system, there is honor to be had. How many make it through the first year? Asked Ender. All who want to, said Graff. Ender almost said, I want to, but held his tongue. This would keep him out of school, and that was stupid. That was just a problem for a few days. It would keep him away from Peter. But what was more important, that might be a matter of life itself. But to leave mother and father, and above all, to leave Valentine, and become a soldier. Ender didn't like fighting. He didn't like Peter's kind, the strong against the weak. And he didn't like his own kind either, the smart against the stupid. I think, Graff said, that Ender and I should have a private conversation. No, Father said. I won't take him without letting you speak to him again, said Graff. And you really can't stop me. Father glared at Graff a moment longer, then got up and left the room. Mother tried to squeeze Ender's hand. She closed the door behind her when she left. Ender, Graff said, if you come with me, you won't be back here for a long time. There aren't any vacations from the battle school. No visitors either. A full course of training lasts until you're 16 years old, when you get your first leave. Under certain circumstances, when you're 12. Believe me, Ender, people change in 6 years, in 10 years. Your sister Valentine will be a woman when you see her again, if you come with me. You'll be strangers. You'll still love her, Ender, but you won't know her. You see, I'm not pretending it's easy. Mom and Dad, I know you, Ender. I've been watching the monitor discs for some time. You won't miss your mother and father. Not much, not for long. They won't miss you long either. Tears came to Ender's eyes. In spite of himself, he turned his face away, but would not reach up to wipe them. They do love you, Ender, but you have to understand what your life has cost them. They were born religious, you know. Your father was baptized in the name John Paul Weishaupt, Catholic, the seventh of nine children. 9 children. That was unthinkable. Criminal. Yes, well, people do strange things for religion. You know the sanctions, Ender. They were not as harsh then, but still not easy. Only the first 2 children had a free education. Taxes steadily rose with each new child. Your father turned 16 and invoked the Non-Complying Families Act to separate himself from his family. He changed his name, renounced his religion, and vowed never to have more than the allotted 2 children. He meant it. All the shame and persecution he went through as a child. He vowed no child of his would go through it. Do you understand? He didn't want me. Well, no one wants a third anymore. You can't expect them to be glad. But your father and mother are a special case. They both renounced their religions. Your mother was a Mormon, but in fact, their feelings are still ambiguous. Do you know what ambiguous means? They feel both ways. They're ashamed of having come from non compliant families. They conceal it, to the degree that your mother refuses to admit to anyone that she was born in Utah, lest they suspect. Your father denies his Polish ancestry, since Poland is still a non compliant nation under the international sanction because of it. You see, having a third, even under the government's direct instructions, undoes everything they've been trying to do. I know that. But it's more complicated than that. Your father still named you with legitimate saints' names. In fact, he baptized all 3 of you himself as soon as you got you home after you were born. And your mother objected. They quarreled over it for a long time. Not because she didn't want you to be baptized, but because she didn't want you baptized Catholic. They haven't really given up their religion. They look at you and see you as a badge of pride because they were able to circumvent the law and have a third. But you're also a badge of cowardice because they dare not go further and practice the noncompliance they still feel is right. And you're a badge of public shame because at every step you interfere with their efforts at assimilation into normal complying society. How can you know all this? We monitored your brother and sister, Ender. You'd be amazed at how sensitive the instruments are. We were connected directly to your brain. We heard all that you heard, whether you were listening carefully or not, whether you understood or not. We understood. So my parents love me and don't love me? They love you. The question is whether they want you here. Your presence in this house is a constant disruption, a source of tension. Do you understand? I'm not the one who causes tension. Not anything you do, Ender. Your life itself. Your brother hates you because you are living proof that he wasn't good enough. Your parents resent you because of all the past they are trying to evade. Valentine loves me with all of her heart, completely, unstingingly. She's devoted to you, and you adore her. I told you it wouldn't be easy. What is it like there? Hard work, studies, just like school here, except we put you into mathematics and computers much more heavily, military history, strategy and tactics, and above all, the battle room. What's that? War games. All the boys are organized into armies. Day after day in zero gravity, there are mock battles. Nobody gets hurt, but winning and losing matter. Everybody starts as a common soldier taking orders. Older boys are your officers, and it's their duty to train you and command you in battle. More than that, I can't tell you. It's like playing buggers and astronauts, except you have weapons that work, and fellow soldiers fighting beside you, and your whole future, and the future of the human race, depends on how well you learn, how well you fight. It's a hard life, and you won't have a normal childhood. Of course, with your mind, and as a third to boot, you wouldn't have a particular normal childhood anyways. All boys? A few girls. They often don't pass the test to get in. Too many centuries of evolution are working against them. None of them will be like Valentine, anyway. But there'll be brothers here, like Peter. Peter wasn't accepted, Ender, for the very reasons that you hate him. I don't hate him, I'm just afraid of him. Well, Peter isn't all bad. He was the best we'd seen in a long time. We asked your parents to choose a daughter next, hoping Valentine would be Peter, but milder. She was too mild, and so we requisitioned you. To be have Peter and have Valentine? If things worked out right, am I? As far as we can tell, our tests are very good, Ender, but they don't tell us everything. In fact, when it comes down to it, they hardly tell us anything. But they're better than nothing. Graf leaned in and took Ender's hands. Ender Wiggin, if it were just a matter of choosing the best and happiest future for you, I would tell you to stay home. Stay here, grow up, be happy. There are worse things than being a third. Worse things than a brother who can't make up his mind whether to be a human being or a jackal. Battle school is one of those things. But we need you. The buggers may seem like a game to you now, Ender, but they damn near wiped us out last time. They had us cold, outnumbered, outweaponed. The only thing that saved us was that we had the most brilliant military commander ever found. Call it fate, call it God, call it damn fool luck. We had Mazar Rackham. But we don't have him now, Ender. We've scraped together everything mankind could provide, a fleet that makes the one that they sent against us seem like a bunch of kids playing in a swimming pool. We have some new weapons too, but it might not be enough, even so, because in the 80 years since the last war, they've had as much time to prepare as we have. We need the best we can get, and we need them fast. Maybe you're not going to work out for us, and maybe you are. Maybe you'll break down under the pressure. Maybe it'll ruin your life. Maybe you'll hate me for coming here to your house today. But if there's a chance that because you're with the fleet, mankind might survive and the buggers might leave us alone forever, then I'm going to ask you to do it, to come with me. Ender had trouble focusing on Colonel Graff. The man looked far away and very small, as if Ender could pick him up with tweezers and drop him in a pocket. To leave everything here and to go to a place that was very hard, with no Valentine, no mom and dad. And then he thought of the films of the buggers that everyone had to see at least once a year. The scathing of China, the Battle of the Belt, death and suffering and terror, and Mazar Rackham and his brilliant maneuvers, destroying an enemy fleet twice his size and twice his firepower, using the little human ships that seemed so frail and weak, like children fighting with grown-ups. And he won. I'm afraid, said Ender quietly, but I'll go with you. Tell me again, said Graff. It's what I was born for, isn't it? If I don't go, why am I alive? Not good enough, said Graff. I don't want to go, said Ender, but I will. You can change your mind. Up until the time you get in the car with me, you can change your mind. After that, you stay at the pleasure of the international fleet. Do you understand that? Ender nodded. All right, let's tell him. Mother cried. Father held Ender tight. Peter shook his hand and said, You lucky little pinhead. Valentine kissed him and left her tears on his cheek. There was nothing to pack, no belongings to take. The school provides everything you need, from uniforms to school supplies. And as for toys, there's only one game. Goodbye, Ender said to his family. He reached up and took Colonel Graff's hand and walked to the door with him. Kill some buggers for me, Peter shouted. I love you, Andrew, Mother called. We'll write to you, Father said. And he got into that car and waited silently in the corridor. He heard Valentine's anguished cry. Come back to me. I love you forever. With Ender, we have to strike a delicate balance. Isolate him enough that he remains creative. Otherwise, he'll adopt the system here and we'll lose him. At the same time, we need to make sure he keeps a strong ability to lead. If he earns rank, he'll lead. It wasn't that simple. Mazarakam could handle his little fleet and win. By the time this war happens, there'll be too much, even for a genius. Too many little boats. He has to work smoothly with his subordinates. Oh, good. He has to be a genius and nice too? Not nice. Nice will let the buggers have us all. So you're going to isolate him. I'll have him completely separated from the rest of the boys by the time we get to school. Oh my gosh. From the rest of the boys by the time we get to the school. I have no doubt of it. I'll be waiting for you to get there. I watched the vids of what he did to the Stilson boy. This is not a sweet little kid you're bringing up here. That's where you're mistaken. He's even sweeter than he looks. But don't worry. We'll purge that in a hurry. Sometimes I think you enjoy breaking these little geniuses. There's an art to it, and I'm very, very good at it. But enjoy? Well, maybe. When they put back the pieces afterward, and it makes them better. You're a monster. Thanks. Does that mean I get a raise? Just the medal. The budget isn't exhaustible. They say that weightlessness can cause disorientation, especially in children, whose sense of direction isn't yet secure. But Ender was disoriented before he left Earth's gravity, before the shuttle launch even began. There were 19 other boys in his launch. They filed out of the bus into the elevator. They talked and joked and bragged and laughed. Ender kept his silence. He noticed how Graff and the other officers were watching them, analyzing. Everything we do means nothing, Ender realized. Them laughing, me not laughing. He toyed with the idea of trying to be like the other boys. He couldn't think of any jokes, and none of theirs seemed funny. Wherever their laughter came from, Ender couldn't find such a place in himself. He was afraid, and fear made him serious. They had dressed him in a uniform, all in a single piece. It felt funny not to have a belt clinched around his waist. He felt baggy and naked dressed like that. There were TV cameras going, perched like animals on the shoulders of crouching, prowling men. The men moved silently, cat-like, so the camera motion would be smooth. Ender caught himself moving smoothly too. He imagined himself being on TV in an interview. The announcer asking him, "How do you feel, Mr. Wiggin?" "Actually, quite well, except hungry." Hungry? Oh, yes. They don't let you eat for 20 hours before the launch. How interesting. I never knew that. All of us are quite hungry, actually. And all the while, during the interview, Ender and the TV guy would slink along smoothly in front of the camera, talking with long, lithe strides. The TV guy was letting him be the spokesman for all the other boys, though Ender was barely competent to speak for himself. For the first time, Ender felt like laughing. He smiled. The other boys near him were laughing at the moment, too, for another reason. They think I'm smiling at their joke, thought Ender, but I'm smiling at something much funnier. Go up the ladder one at a time, said an officer. When you come to an aisle with empty seats, take one. There aren't any window seats. It was a joke. The other boys laughed. Ender was the last, but not the very last. The TV cameras did not give up, though. Will Valentine see me disappear into the shuttle? He thought of waving to her, of running to the camera and saying, "Can I tell Valentine goodbye?" But he didn't know if it would be censored out. They weren't supposed to miss anybody. Ender didn't know about the censorship, but he did know that the running cameras would be wrong. He walked to the short bridge to the door in the shuttle. He noticed that the wall to his right was carpeted like a floor. That was where the disorientation began. The moment he thought of the wall as a floor, he began to feel like he was walking on the wall. He got to the ladder and noticed that the vertical shaft behind it was also carpeted. Am I climbing up the floor, hand over hand, step by step? And then, for fun, he pretended that he was climbing down the wall. He did it almost instantaneously in his mind, convincing himself that the best evidence of gravity until he reached any seat. He found himself gripping the seat tightly, even though gravity pulled him firmly against it. The other boys were bouncing in their seats a little, poking and pushing, shouting. Ender carefully found the straps and figured out how they fit together to hold him at the crotch, waist, and shoulders. He imagined the ship dangling upside down on the undersurface of the earth, the giant fingers of gravity holding them firmly in place. But we will slip away, he thought. We are going to fall off this planet. He did not know its significance at the time. Later, though, he would remember that it was even before he left the Earth that he thought of it as a planet, like any other, not particularly his own. "Oh, already figured it out," said Graff. He was standing on the ladder. "Coming with us?" Ender asked. "I don't usually come down for recruiting," Graff said. "I'm kind of in charge there, administrator of the school, like a principal." They told me I had to come back or I'd lose my job. He smiled. Ender smiled back. He felt comfortable with Graf. Graf was good. He was principal of the battle school. Ender relaxed a little. He would have a friend there. Adults helped the other boys build themselves in place. Those who hadn't done as Ender did. They already waited for an hour while a TV at the front of the shuttle introduced them to shuttle flight, the history of space flight, and their possible future with the great starships of the IF. Very boring stuff. Ender had seen such films before, except he had not been belted to the seat inside of a shuttle, hanging upside down from the belly of Earth. The launch wasn't bad, a little scary, some jolting, a few moments of panic that this might be the first failed launch since the early days of the shuttle. The movies hadn't made it plain how much violence you could experience lying on your back in a soft chair. Then it was over, and he really was hanging by the straps, no gravity anywhere. But because he had already reoriented himself, he was not surprised when Graf came up the ladder backwards, as if he had been climbing down the front of the shuttle. Now, it did bother him when Graf looked at his feet under a rung and pushed off with his hands, so that suddenly he swung upright, as if this were an ordinary plane. The reorientations were too much for some. One boy gagged. Ender understood why they had been forbidden to eat anything 20 hours before the launch. Vomiting in null gravity wouldn't be fun. But for Ender, Graf's gravity game was fun, and he carried it further, imagining Graf was actually hanging upside down in the center of this aisle, and then picturing him sticking straight out from a sidewall. Gravity could go any which way. However, I want I want it to go. I can make Graf stand on his head, and he doesn't even know it. What do you think is so funny, Wiggin? Graf's voice was sharp and angry. What did I do wrong, thought Ender. Did I laugh out loud? I asked you a question, soldier, barked Graf. Oh, yes, this was the beginning of the training routine. Ender had seen some military shows on TV, and they always shouted a lot at the beginning of training before the soldiers and the officer became good friends. Yes, sir, Ender said. Well, answer it then. I thought of you hanging upside down by your feet. I thought it was funny. It sounded stupid now, with Graf looking at him coldly. To tell you, I suppose, it is funny. It is funny to anyone else here. Is it funny to anyone else here? Murmurs of no. Why isn't it? Graf looked at them with all contempt. Scum brains. That's what we've got in this launch. Pinhead little morons. Only one of you had the brains to realize that no gravity, directions, or whatever you conceive them to be. Do you understand that, Shafts? The boy nodded. No, you don't. Of course you didn't. Not only stupid, but a liar too. There was only one boy in this launch with any brains at all, and that's Ender Wiggin. Take a good look at him, little boys. He's going to be a commander when you're still in diapers up there, because he knows how to think in null gravity. And you just want to throw up. This wasn't the way the show was supposed to go. Graf was supposed to pick on him, not set him up as the best. They were supposed to be against each other at first, so they could become friends later. Most of you are going to ice out. Get used to that, little boys. Most of you are going to end up in combat school because you don't have the brains to handle deep space piloting. Most of you aren't worth the price of bringing you up here to battle school because you don't have what it takes. Some of you might make it. Some of you might be worth sending to humanity. But don't bet on it. I'm betting on only one. Graf suddenly did a backflip and caught the ladder with his hands, then swung his feet away from the ladder, doing a handstand if the floor was down, dangling by his hands if the floor was up. Hand over hand, he swung himself back along the aisle to his seat. Looks like you've made it here. And you've got it made, whispered the boy next to him. Ender shook his head. Oh, won't even talk to me? The boy said. I didn't ask him to say that stuff, Ender whispered. He felt a sharp pain on the top of his head. Then again, some giggles from behind. The boy in the next seat back had unfastened his straps. Again, a blow to the head. Go away, Ender thought. I didn't do anything to you. Against the blow to the head, laughter from the boys. Didn't Graf see this? Wasn't he going to stop it? Another blow harder. It really hurt. Where was Graf? Then it became clear. Graf had deliberately caused it. It was worse than the abuse in the shows. When the sergeant picked on you, the others liked you better. But when the officer prefers you, the others hate you. Do you like this? Hey, Super Brain, is this fun? Another blow like this. Oh, another blow. This one so hard Ender cried out softly in the pain. If Graf was setting him up, he'd be no help unless he helped himself. He waited until he thought another blow was about to come. Now he thought, and yes, the blow was there, it hurt. But Ender was already trying to sense the coming of the next blow. And now, yes, right on time. I've got you, Ender thought. Just as the next blow was coming, Ender reached up with both hands, snatched the boy by the wrist, and then pulled down the arm hard. In gravity, the boy would have been jammed against Ender's seat back, hurting his chest. In no gravity, however, he flipped over the seat completely, up toward the ceiling. Ender wasn't expecting it. He hadn't realized how no gravity magnified the effects of even a child's movements. The boy sailed through the air, bouncing against the ceiling, then down against another boy in his seat, and then out into the aisle, his arms flailing until he screamed and his body slammed into the bulkhead in front of the compartment, his left arm twisted under him. It took only seconds. Graf was already there, snatching the boy out of the air. Deftly, he propelled him down the aisle towards the other men. Left arm broken, I think, he said. In moments, the boy had been given a drug and lay quietly in the air as the officer ballooned a splint around his arm. Ender felt sick. He had only meant to catch the boy's arm. No, he had meant to hurt him, and he had pulled with all his strength. He hadn't meant to be so public, but the boy was feeling exactly the pain that Ender had meant him to feel. No gravity had betrayed him, that was all. I am Peter. I am just like him. And Ender hated himself. Graf stayed at the front of the cabin. What are you, slow learners? In your feeble little minds, haven't you picked up one little fact? You were brought here to be soldiers. In your old schools and your old families, maybe you were the big shot. Maybe you were tough. Maybe you were smart. But we chose the best of the best. And that's only the kind of kid that we're going to meet now. And when I tell you Ender Wiggin is the best in this launch, take the hint, my little dorklings. Don't mess with him. Little boys have died in battle school before. Do I make myself clear? There was silence the rest of the launch. The boy sitting next to Ender was scrupulously careful not to touch him. I'm not a killer, Ender told himself over and over again. I'm not Peter. No matter what Graf says, I'm not. I was defending myself. I bore it a long time. I was patient. I'm not what he said. A voice over the speaker told them they were approaching the school. It took 20 minutes to decelerate and dock. Ender lagged behind the others. They were not unwilling to let him be the last to leave the shuttle, climbing upwards in the direction that had been down when they embarked. Graf was waiting at the end of this narrow tube that had led from the shuttle into the heart of the battle school. Was it a good flight, Ender? Graf asked cheerfully. I thought you were, my friend. Despite himself, Ender's voice trembled. Graf looked puzzled. Whatever gave you that idea, Ender? Because you spoke nicely to me and honestly. You didn't lie. I won't lie now either, said Graf. My job isn't to be friends. My job is to produce the best soldiers in the world, in the whole history of the world. We need a Napoleon, an Alexander. Except when Napoleon lost in the end, and Alexander flamed out and died young. We need a Julius Caesar, except he made himself a dictator and died for it. My job is to produce such a creature, and all the men and women he'll need to help him. Nowhere in it does it say I have to make friends with children. You made them hate me. So? What will you do about it? Crawl into a corner? Start kissing their little backsides so they'll love you again? There's only one thing that will make them stop hating you, and that's being so good at what you do they can't ignore you. I told them you were the best. Now you damn well better be. What if I can't? Then too bad. Look, Ender, I'm sorry if you're lonely and afraid, but the buggers are out there. 10 billion, 100 billion, a million billion of them for all we know, with as many ships for all we know, with weapons we can't understand, and a willingness to use those weapons to wipe us out. It isn't the world at stake, Ender. Just us. Just humankind. As far as the rest of the biosphere is concerned, we could be wiped out, and it would adjust. It would get on with the next step in evolution. But humanity doesn't want to die. As a species, we have evolved to survive. And the way we do it is by straining and straining. And at last, every few generations, giving birth to genius. The one who invents the wheel and light and flight. The one who builds a city, a nation, an empire. Do you understand any of this? Ender thought he did, but wasn't sure. So he said nothing. No, of course not. So I'll put it bluntly. Human beings are free except when humanity needs them. Maybe humanity needs you to do something. Maybe humanity needs me to find out what you're good for. We might be both doing despicable things, Ender, but if humankind survives, then we were good tools. Is that all? Just tools? Individual human beings are all tools that the others use to help us all survive. That's a lie. No, it's just a half truth. You can worry about the other half after we win this war. It'll be over before I grow up, Ender said. I hope you're wrong, said Graf. By the way, you aren't helping yourself at all talking to me. The other boys are no doubt telling each other that old Ender Wiggin is in the back licking up to Graf. If word once gets around that you're a teacher's boy, you're iced for sure. In other words, go away and leave me alone. Goodbye, said Ender. He pulled himself hand over hand along the tube, along the tube where the other boys had gone. Graf watched them go. One of the teachers near him said, "Is that the one?" God knows, said Graf. If Ender isn't him, then he'd better show up soon. Maybe it's nobody, said the teacher. Maybe. If that's the case, Anderson, in my opinion, God is a bugger. You can quote me on that. I will. They stood in silence a while longer. Anderson, The kid's wrong. I am his friend. I know. He's clean, right to the heart. He's good. I've read the reports. Anderson, think what we're going to do to him. Anderson was defiant. We're going to make him the best military commander in history and put the fate of the world in his shoulders. For his sake, I hope it isn't him. I do. Cheer up. The buggers may kill us first before he graduates. Graf smiled. You're right. I feel better already. There's a lot of like, oh, hey, what's up, dude? Hello, dude. Chicano cowboy. I can tell you the Gatorade powder has really come a long way. Really come a long way. Ender's Game. I am glad that this book was mandatory reading when I went up, but I simply think that you won't see it on a lot of schedules. I don't know. Just because like they make it clear at the battle school that it's like, basically all boys there. And it makes sense. I am delighted. I'm absolutely delighted. The battle school is called Battle School, and the battle room is called the Battle Room. I don't remember it being that simple, but that is fantastic. Who wouldn't want to go to battle school? Like I wish. I mean, I'm not. I probably wouldn't have qualified for battle school, and it's way too late for me. But it would have been cool to go to battle school. I think. In fact, yeah. If I could do a redo, definitely I would save it so I could go to battle school because, I mean, like, school is fun, but like battle school, come on. Being a battle commander, that's the way you become a cool guy is being a battle commander. That just sounds like a fun thing. I don't know. Being judged, yeah, battle school. And that really is the best part of this whole book is the battle school. I like it. I kind of just breeze over all of like the meticulous direction. Like I like the whole like shuttle orientation thing. Look, I get it. And if you want to get into the zero G thing, I'm telling you, it's just way easier to actually read it on the paper. But I'm not the amount of effort and length it would take me to kind of just not breeze over that the way I do with my tone. It's just I want to get through it for the most part. If you, I don't actually visualize everything literally as it's said. I kind of get more of a running, um, more of an abstract picture. I don't know. I sometimes I can visualize. Sometimes I do visualize literally what's happening, but typically I'm just getting the most important stuff and moving along because all the arbitrary stuff to me is arbitrary. It doesn't really matter. And I guess that just comes down to reading by the numbers. Like I try to read a lot when I do read, just because if you don't, like it just becomes like a ridiculous out of focus blur, I think. You have my admiration. Breaking an arm, that was a masterstroke. That was an accident. Really? And I've already commended you in your official report. It's too strong. It makes that other little bastard into a hero. It could screw up training for a lot of kids. I thought Ender might call for help. Call for help? I thought that's what you valued most in him, that he settles his own problems. When he's out there surrounded by an enemy fleet, there ain't gonna be nobody to help him if he calls. Who would have guessed the little sucker would be out of his seat, and that he'd just land just wrong against the bulkhead? Just one more example of the stupidity of the military. If you had any brains, you'd be in a real career, like selling life insurance. You too, mastermind. We've just got to face the fact that we're second rate. With the fate of humanity in our hands, gives you a delicious feeling of power, doesn't it? Especially because this time, if we lose, there won't be any criticism of us at all. I never thought of it that way, but let's not lose. See how Ender handles it. If we've already lost him, if he can't handle this, who next? Who else? I'll make up a list. In the meantime, figure out how to unlose Ender. I told you, his isolation can't be broken. He can never come out to believe that anybody will ever help him. Ever. If he once thinks there's an easy way out, he's wrecked. You're right. That would be terrible. If he believed he had a friend. He can have friends. It's parents he can't have. The other boys had already chosen their bunks when Ender had arrived. Ender stopped in the doorway of the dormitory, looking for the sole remaining bed. The ceiling was low. Ender could reach up and touch it. A child-sized room, with the bottom bunk resting on the floor. The other boys were watching him, corner-wise. Sure enough, the bottom bunk, right by the door, was the only empty bed. For a moment it occurred to Ender that by letting the others put him in the worst place, he was inviting later bullying. Yet, he couldn't very well oust someone else. So he smiled broadly. Hey, thanks, he said, not sarcastically at all. Hey, thanks, he said, not sarcastically at all. He took it as sincerely as if they had reserved him for the best position. I thought I was going to have to ask for the low bunk by the door. He sat down and looked at the locker and stood open at the foot of the bunk. There was a paper taped inside of the door. Place your hands on the scanner at the head of your bunk and speak your name twice. Ender found the scanner, a sheet of opaque plastic. He put his hands on it and said, Ender Wiggin. Ender Wiggin. The scanner glowed green for a moment. Ender closed his locker and began to reopen it. He couldn't. Then he put his hand on the scanner and said, Ender Wiggin. The locker opened. So did the other compartments. One of them contained 4 jumpsuits, like the one he was wearing, and one white one. Another compartment contained a small desk, just like the ones at school. So they weren't through with studies yet. It was the largest compartment, and that contained the prize. It looked like a spacesuit at first glance, complete with helmet and gloves, but it wasn't. There was no airtight seal. Still, it would effectively cover the whole body. It was thickly padded. It was also a little stiff. And there was a pistol within, a laser gun it looked like, since the end was solid, clear glass. But surely they wouldn't let children have lethal weapons. Not lasers, said a man. Ender looked up. It was the one he hadn't seen before. A young and kind-looking man. But it has a tight enough beam, well focused. You can aim it and make a 3-inch circle of light on a wall of 100 meters off. What's it for? One of the games we play during recreation. Does anyone else have his locker open? The man looked around. I mean, have you followed directions and coded your voices and hands? You can't get into the lockers until you do. This room is your home for the first year or so here at the battle school. So get the bunk you want and stay with you. Ordinarily, we'd let you elect your chief officer and install him in the lower bunk by the door, but apparently that position has been taken. Can't recode the lockers now, so think about whom you want to choose. Dinner in 7 minutes. Follow the lighted dots on the floor. Your color code is red, yellow, yellow. Whenever you're assigned a path to follow, it will be red, yellow, yellow, 3 dots side by side. Go where those lights indicate. What's your color code, boys? Red, yellow, yellow. Very good. My name is Dap. I'm your mom for the next few months. The boys laughed. Laugh all you like, but keep it in mind. If you get lost in the school, which is quite possible, don't go opening doors. Some of them lead outside. More laughter. Instead, just tell someone that your mom is Dap, and they'll call me. Or tell them your color, and I'll lay up a path for you to get home. If you have a problem, come talk to me. Remember, I'm the only person who's paid to be nice to you. But not too nice. Give me any lip, and I'll break your face, okay? They laughed again, and Dap had a room of friends. Frightened children are so easy to win. Which way is down? Anybody tell me? They told him. Okay, that's true. But direction is toward the outside. The ship is spinning, and that's what makes it feel like it's down. The floor actually curves around in that direction. But keep going long enough that way, and you'll come back to where you started. Except don't try it, because up that way is teachers' quarters, and up that way is the bigger kids. And the bigger kids don't like launchies butting in. You might get pushed around. In fact, you might get pushed around. And when you do, don't come crying to me, got it? This is battle school, not nursery school. What are we supposed to do then? Asked the boy, a really small black kid who had a top bunk near Ender's. If you don't like getting pushed around, figure out for yourself what to do about it. But I warn you, murder is strictly against the rules. So is any deliberate injury. I understand there was one attempted murder on the way up here. A broken arm. That kind of thing happens. Somebody ices out. You got it? What's icing out? Asked the boy, with his arm puffed up in the splint. Ice. Put out in the cold. Sent earthside. Finished at battle school. Nobody looked at Ender. So, boys, if any of you are thinking of being troublemakers, at least be clever about it, okay? Dap left. They still didn't look at Ender. Ender felt the fear growing in his body. The kid whose arm he broke, Ender didn't feel sorry for him. He was a Stiltson. And like Stiltson, he was already gathering a gang. A little knot of kids. Several of the bigger ones. They were laughing at the far end of the room. and every now and then one of them would turn to look at Ender. With all of his heart, Ender wanted to go home. What did any of this have to do with saving the world? There was no monitor now, and it was Ender against the gang again. Only they were right in his room. Peter again, but without Valentine. The fear stayed all through dinner, as no one sat by him in the mess hall. The other boys were talking about things, the big scoreboard on the wall, the food, the bigger kids. Ender could only watch in isolation. The scoreboards were team standings, win-loss records, and with the most recent scores. Some of the bigger boys apparently had bets on the most recent games. Two teams, Manticore and Asp, had no recent score. These boxes were flashing. Ender decided they must be playing now. Oh. He noticed the older boys were divided into groups, according to the uniforms they wear. Some with different uniforms were talking together, but generally the groups each had their own area. Launchies their own group, and the two or three older groups all had plain blue uniforms. But the big kids, the ones that were on teams, they were wearing much more flamboyant clothing. Ender tried to guess which ones went with which name. Scorpion and Spider were easy. So were Flame and Tide. A bigger boy came to sit by him. Not just a little bigger. He looked to be 12 or 13. Getting his man's growth started. Hi, he said. Hi, I'm Mick. Ender. That's a name? Since I was little. That's what my sister called me. Not a bad name, Ender. Finisher, eh? Hope so. Ender. You the bugger in your lunch? Ender shrugged. I noticed you eating all alone. Every lunch has one like that. Kid that nobody takes to right away. Sometimes I think the teachers do it on purpose. The teachers aren't very nice. You'll notice that. Yeah. So you're the bugger. I guess so. Hey, nothing to cry about, you know. He gave Ender his roll and took Ender's pudding. Eat nutritious stuff. It'll keep you strong. Mick dug into the pudding. What about you? Said Ender. Me? I'm nothing. I'm the fart in the air conditioning. I'm always there. Most of the time, no one knows it. Ender smiled tentatively. Yeah, funny, but no joke. I got nowhere here. I'm getting big now. They're going to send me to the next school pretty soon. No way it'll be tactical school for me. I've never been a leader, you see. Only the guys who get to be leaders have a shot at it. How do you get to be a leader? Hey, if I knew, you think I'd be like this? How many guys my size do you see here? Not many. Ender didn't say that, though. A few. Not the only half-iced bugger fodder. A few of us. The other guys, they're all commanders. All the guys from my launch have their own teams now, not me. Ender nodded. Listen, little guy. I'm doing you a favor. Make friends. Be a leader. Kiss butts if you got to. But if the other guys despise you, you know what I mean? Ender nodded. Nah, you don't know nothing. You launchies are all alike. You don't know nothing. Mine's like space. Nothing there. And if anything hits you, you fall apart. Look, when you end up like me, don't forget that somebody warned you. It's the last nice thing anybody's going to do for you. So why did you tell me? What are you, a smart mouth? Shut up and eat. Ender shut up and ate. He didn't like Mick, and he knew there was no chance he could end up like that. Maybe that was what the teachers were planning, but Ender didn't intend to fit into their plans. I will not be the bugger of my group, Ender thought. I didn't leave Valentine and mother and father to come and just be iced. And he lifted the fork to his mouth. He could feel his family around him, as they had always been. He knew just which way to turn his head to look up and see mother, trying to get Valentine not to slurp. He knew just where father would be, scanning the news on the table while pretending to be part of the dinner conversation. Peter, pretending to take a crushed pea out of his nose, and even Peter could be funny. It was a mistake to think of any of them. He felt a sob rise in his throat and swallowed it down. He could not see his plate. He could not cry. There was no chance he would be treated with compassion. Dap was not his mother. Any sign of weakness would tell the Stilsons and Peters that his boy was broken. Ender did what he always did when Peter tormented him. He began to count doubles. 1, 2, 4. 8, 6. Okay, he goes through a lot. He does a lot of counting. There's a whole paragraph of counting. Until that night when the lights went dim, and in the distance you could hear several boys whimpering for their mothers or fathers' dogs. For their mothers or fathers or dogs. Then he could not help himself. His lips formed Valentine's name. He could hear her voice laughing in the distance just down the hall. He could see mother passing his door, looking to be sure he was all right. He could hear father laughing at the video. It was all so clear, and it would never be that way again. I'll be old when I ever see them again. 12 at the earliest. Why did I say yes? What? What was I such a fool for? Going to school would have been nothing. Facing Stilson every day, and Peter, he was a peasant, but Ender wasn't afraid of him. I want to go home, he whispered. But his whisper was the whisper he used when he cried out in pain when Peter tormented him. The sound didn't travel farther than his own ears, and sometimes not that far. In his ears, and his tears could fall unwanted on his sheet, but his sobs were so gentle they did not shake the bed, so quiet that they could not be heard. But the ache was there, thick in his throat, and the front of his face, hot in his chest, and in his eyes. I want to go home. Dab came to the door that night and moved quietly among the beds, touching a hand here, a forehead there. Where he went, there was more crying, not less. The touch of kindness in this frightening place was enough to push some over the edge into tears. Not Ender, though. When Dab came, his crying was over and his face was dry, and he was lying face. And it was the lying face he presented to mother and father when Peter had been cruel to him, and he dared not let it show. Thank you for this, Peter, for dry eyes and silent weeping. You taught me how to hide everything I felt, more than ever. I need that now. Yeah, when I really got the basic training, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? What the fuck? Like, I was like, wow, this is not a good idea. But I didn't miss anyone. I was just mad. I was mad at the people that convinced me to go there. I thought about them individually, and I thought about that they'd never done anything like that, basically. So fuck them. But it was good. It was okay. It was. I mean, it was the hardest thing I ever done, but it was fun. It's like summer camp, except you can't take a nap. That's basically all. It's just like summer camp, but no napping, no naps. I don't even think Ender. I mean, I guess what makes Ender more than just like a regular fucker, or sorry, just like what makes him more than more human than human is the selective breeding process of the state. The state has been like carefully monitoring and like allowing like only certain people to breed in certain ways to produce Ender. And like it's not it's it's not even that really that part that's the big part that gives him his ability. It's the fact that they have such an excellent selection process. That's the key, right? Because it wouldn't even matter if Ender was born and he just lived a normal life, right, and just went to school forever. It's the fact that not only they could cultivate him, but they could harvest him as well. And I think that's kind of like an underline like a very subtle plot part. His whole like all the technology in this so far, it really just reminds me of the 70s. It reminds me of just like all those like 70s sci-fi movies. It's kind of funny that the dad is the one that's kind of like the zoomer at the table watching like news and videos and laughing and giggling and not like engaging in like any like conversation. Um that part is kind of fun. And it's kind of like in a way it just seems just dated to me, kind of like I don't think that the explanation of this stuff is it's abstract, but at the same time I just see through the cracks in the veneers, and that's fine. It doesn't have to, not everything has to look like Star Trek Wars. And it's cool if this if it like if it's future 70s, that's tight. If that's the whole like if there is an aesthetic here, if you want one, that's the one I'm getting. It's just odd. And I mean, I really would imagine that if this was competently done, it wouldn't be that like it would be kind of like that first episode of Star Trek Next Generation where everything looks kind of off. You're just like looking at the set and you're like, oh, they chose that color. And maybe it wouldn't have to be like that, but that's really what I'm getting. I know that there was a movie, and it's I mean it's a movie, and it's a movie that works, and it's everything about the movie is good. Okay, there's nothing bad about the movie. All right, but it's not the same, I guess. Right now, I think we're almost out of the exposition. I've been really hoping to just get out of exposition land. Really isn't necessary, and I'll tell you why. Just short stories for me make exposition land seem so mundane because you're just like, okay, why don't we just get on with it? Um, so exposition land, I think, is why a lot of readers don't stick along. Like reading itself, I think, has made a chore because of exposition land. I mean, they talk about, I don't know, in school, I never really got the picture so much, but just killing the exposition and getting on with the book is typically the best, I think. Yeah, I mean, okay, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing is the exposition is like world building and character development, all that, right? So it's important to do, but it's not, I don't think it's really that important to include in the story, okay? Like it's important for you as the writer to know that all this stuff happens, but not for the reader, okay? But because you know that all this stuff happened, now you have a greater threshold or a greater determination for where things fall in a threshold, if that makes sense. Like what will have consistency within that world is what I'm getting at. I mean, I guess it's important. It's important. I mean, they kind of cleverly, okay. Basically, each each chapter starts off with this like really heavy-handed exposition where basically um Gaff or Graph, he's talking with the other guy, and they're basically just like screaming exposition, and that's cool. But the one reason it's kind of good is it gives a backdrop, and it like almost foreshadows what's going to happen in the next the entire chapter. So that just it works. Okay, it just works well. Um, it's not that bad. All right, I'm just saying like so far you might be thinking like, okay, well, what's and I'm not trying to taint the well here. Because, well, I mean, I guess now we know in 45 pages who Ender is, but um, for me, I guess rereading it, really understanding that there's kind of like a weird international going on. Like basically, they talk about non-compliant states, so like look, the only thing I can really like understand is like his mom's a Mormon, his dad's a Baptist or a Catholic or something from Poland, right? And then like, so they were trying to renounce their faith, and they're trying to like show that they're compliant. So I believe that they're like basically it's kind of like the Galactic Federation from Starship Troopers, except it's an international. So instead of like one nation, it's like some like conglomerate of like facade nations like the USSR. I would imagine. Um, Getting a Mormon wife would be tight. This was school. Every day, hours of classes, reading, numbers, history. Videos of the bloody battles in space. The Marines spraying their guts over the walls of the bugger ships. Hollows of the clean wars of the fleet. Ships turning into puffs of light as the spacecraft killed each other deftly in the deep night. Many things to learn. Ender worked as hard as anyone. All of them struggled for the last time in their lives. As for the first time in their lives, they competed with classmates who were at least as bright as they were. But the games, that was what they lived for. That was what filled the hours between waking and sleeping. Dap introduced them to the game room, and their second day. It was up, way up above the decks where the boys lived and worked. They climbed ladders to where the gravity weakened, and there, in the cavern, they saw the dazzling light of the games. Some of the games they knew, some they had even played at home, simple ones and hard ones. Ender walked past the two-dimensional games on video and began to study the games the bigger boys played, the holographic games with objects hovering in the air. He was the only launchy in that part of the room, and every now and then one of the bigger boys would shove him out of the way. What are you doing here? Get lost. Fly off. And of course he would fly. And the low gravity here, leave his feet and soar until he ran into something or someone else. Every time he thought, every time though, he extricated himself and went back, perhaps to a different spot, to get a different angle on the game. He was too small to see the controls, how the game was actually done. That didn't matter. He got the movement of it in the air. The way the player dug tunnels in the darkness, tunnels of light, which enemy ships would search for and then follow mercilessly until they caught the player's ship. The player could make traps, mines, drifting bombs, loops in the air, and force the enemy ships to repeat endlessly. Some of the players were clever, others lost quickly. Ender liked it better, though, when the two boys played against each other. When two boys played against each other, they had to use each other's tunnels, and it quickly became clear which of them was worth anything of the strategy of it. Within an hour or so, it began to pall. Ender understood the regularities by then, understood the rules the computer was following, so that he knew he could always, once he mastered the controls, outmaneuver the enemy. Spirals when the enemy was like this, loops when the enemy was like that. Lie and wait with one trap, lay 7 traps, and then lure them in like this. There was no challenge to it. Then, just a matter of playing until the computer got so fast no human reflexes could overcome it. That wasn't fun. It was the other boys he wanted to play. The boys who had been so trained by the computer that even when they played against each other, they tried to emulate the computer, think like a machine instead of a boy. I could beat them this way. I could beat them that way. I'd like a turn against you, he said to the boy who had just won. Lazy me? What is this? Asked the boy. Is it a bug or a bugger? A new flock of dwarfs just came aboard, said another boy. But it talks. Did you know they could talk? I see, said Ender. You're afraid to play me. 2 out of 3. Beating you, said the boy, would be as easy as pissing in the shower. And not have as fun, said another. I'm Ender Wiggin. Listen up, Scrunch Face. You nobody got that? Nobody got that. You not nobody till you first kill. You got that? The slang of the older boys had its own rhythm. Ender picked it up quite enough. If I'm nobody, then how come you're scared to play me? 2 out of 3. Now the other boys were impatient. Kill the squirt quick, and let's get it over with. So Ender took his place at the unfamiliar controls. His hands were small, but the controls were quite simple enough. It only took a little experimentation to find which buttons used certain weapons. Movement control was a standard wire ball. His reflexes were slow at first. The other boy, whose name he didn't know, got ahead quickly. But Ender learned, and he was doing much better by the time the game ended. Satisfied, Launchy? 2 out of 3. We don't allow 2 out of 3 games. So you beat me at the first time I ever touched the game? Ender said. If you can't do it twice, you can't do it at all. They played again, and this time Ender was deft enough to pull off a few maneuvers that the boy had obviously never seen before. His patterns couldn't cope with them. Ender didn't win easily, but he won. The bigger boy stopped laughing and joking then. The third went in total silence. Ender won it quickly and efficiently. When the game ended, one of the older boys said, About time they replaced this machine. Getting so many pin brain can beat it now. Not a word of congratulation, just total silence as Ender walked away. He didn't go far, just stood off near the distance and watched as the players tried to use the things he had shown them. Any pin brain? Ender smiled inwardly. They won't forget me. He felt great. He had won something. And against older boys. Probably not the best of the older boys, but he no longer had the panicked feeling that he might be out of his depth. The battle school might be too much for him. All he had to do was watch the game and understand how things worked. And then he could use the system and even excel. It was the waiting and watching that cost him the most. For during that time, he had to endure. The boy whose arm he had broken was out for vengeance. His name, Ender quickly learned, was Bernard. He spoke his own name with a French accent, since the French, with their arrogant separatism, insisted that teaching of the standard not begin at the age of 4, when the French language patterns were already set. His accent made him exotic and interesting. His broken arm made him a martyr. His sadism made him a natural focus for all those that loved pain in others. Ender became their enemy. Little things, kicking his bed every time they went in and out of the door, jostling him with his meal tray, tripping on him on the ladders. Ender learned quickly not to leave anything outside of his locker, so he learned to be quick on his feet to catch himself. Maladroit, Bernard called him once, and the name stuck. Maladroit. There were times when Ender was very angry. With Bernard, of course, anger was inadequate. It was the kind of person he was, a tormentor. What enraged Ender was how willingly the others went along with him. Surely they knew there was no justice in Bernard's revenge. Surely they knew they had struck first at Ender in the shuttle, that Ender had been responding in violence, to violence. If they knew, they acted as if they didn't. But if they did not know, they should be able to tell Bernard himself that he was a snake. After all, Ender wasn't his only target. Bernard was setting up a kingdom, wasn't he? Ender watched him from the fringes of the group as Bernard established a hierarchy. Some of the boys were useful to him, and he flattered them outrageously. Some of the boys were willing servants, doing whatever he wanted, even though he treated them with contempt. But a few chafed under Bernard's rule. Ender, watching, knew who resented Bernard. Shin was small, ambitious, and easily needled. Bernard had discovered that quickly and started calling him Worm. Because he's so small, Bernard said, and because he wiggles. Look how he shimmies his butt when he walks. Shin stormed off, but they only laughed harder. Look, see a worm? Ender said nothing to Shin. It would be too obvious. Then, he was starting his own competing gang. He just sat up with his desk on his lap, looking as studious as possible. He was not studying. He was telling his desk to keep sending a message into the interrupt queue every 30 seconds. The message was to everyone, and was short and to the point. What made it hard was figuring out how to disguise who it was from, the way the teachers could. Messages from one of the boys could always have their name automatically inserted. Ender hadn't cracked the teacher's security system yet, so he couldn't pretend to be a teacher, but he was able to set up a file for a non-existent student, who he whimsically named God. Only when the message was ready to go did he try to catch Shin's eye. Like all the other boys, he was watching Bernard and his cronies laugh and joke, making fun of the math teacher, who often stopped in mid-sentence and looked around as if he had been let off the bus at the wrong stop and didn't know where he was. Eventually, though, Shin glanced around. Ender nodded to him, pointed to his desk, and smiled. Shin looked puzzled. Ender held up his desk a little and looked at it. Shin reached for his own desk. Ender sent the message. Shin saw it at once. Shin read it, then laughed. He looked at Ender as if to say, "Did you write this?" Ender shrugged, as if to say, "I don't know who did this, but it sure wasn't me." Shin laughed again, and several of the other boys, who were not close to Bernard's group, got out their desks and looked. Every 30 seconds, the message appeared on every desk, marched around the screen quickly, and then disappeared. The other boys laughed together. "What's so funny?" Bernard asked. Ender made sure he was not smiling when Bernard looked around the room, imitating the fear so many others felt. Shin, of course, smiled more defiantly. It took a moment. Then Bernard told one of his boys to bring out a desk. Together, they read the message. Bernard went red with anger. Who did this? He shouted. God, said Shin. I'm sure as hell it wasn't you, Bernard said. This takes too much brains for a worm. Ender's message expired. After 5 minutes, after a while, a message appeared from Bernard. I know it was you, signed Bernard. Ender didn't look up. He acted, in fact, as if he hadn't seen the message. Bernard just wants to catch me, looking guilty. He doesn't know. Of course, it didn't matter if he knew. Bernard would punish him all the more, because he had to rebuild his position. The one thing he couldn't stand was having the other boys laughing at him. He had to make clear who was the boss. So Ender knocked down in the shower that morning one of Bernard's boys pretending to trip over him and managed to plant a knee in his belly. Ender took it in silence. He was still watching. As far as the open war was concerned, he would do nothing. But in the other war, the war of desks, he already had his next attack in place. When he got back from the shower, Bernard was raging, kicking beds and yelling at boys. I didn't write that, shut up! Marching constantly around everybody's desk. I didn't write that message, Bernard shouted. After the shouting had been going on for some time, Dap appeared at the door. What's the fuss, he said. Somebody's been writing messages using my name, Bernard was sullen. What message? It doesn't matter what message. It does to me. Dap picked up the nearest desk, which happened to belong to the boy bunked above Ender. Dap read it, smiled and very slightly, and gave back the desk. Interesting, he said. Aren't you going to find out who did it? Demanded Bernard. Oh, I know who did it, Dap said. Yes, Ender thought. The system was too easily broken. They mean us to broke it, or sections of it. They know it was me. Well, who then? Are you shouting at me, soldier? Asked Dap very softly. At once the mood in the room changed. From rage on the part of Bernard's closest friends and barely contained mirth among the rest, all became somber. Authority was about to speak. No, sir. Everybody knows that the system automatically puts on the name of the sender. I didn't write that. Shouting? Asked Dap. Yesterday, somebody sent a message that was signed God, Bernard said. Really? Said Dap. I don't know he was signed under the system. Dap turned and left, and the room filled with laughter. Bernard's attempt to be the ruler of the room was broken. Only a few stayed with him now, but they were the most vicious. And Ender knew that until he was through the watching, it would be hard work on him. Still, the tampering with the system had done its work. Bernard was contained, and all the boys had some quality were free of him. And all the boys who had some quality were free of him. Best of all, Ender had done it without sending him to the hospital. Much better this way. Then he settled down to the serious business of designing a security system for his own desk, since the safeguards built in the system were obviously inadequate. If a 6-year-old could break into the room, they were obviously put there as a plaything, not as a serious security. Just another game that the teachers had set up for us. And if... How did you do that? Shin asked them at breakfast. Ender nodded quietly. That this was the first time another launcher of his own class had sat with him at a meal. Do what? Send a message with a fake name. And Bernard's name. That was great. Poor Bernard, said Ender murmured. He's so sensitive. Come on, Ender, you broke into the system. How'd you do it? Ender shook his head and smiled. Thanks for thinking I'm bright enough to do that. I just happened to see it first, that's all. Okay, you don't have to tell me, said Shin. Still, it was great. They laughed together, and the two launchies joined them, and two other launchies joined them. Ender's isolation was over. The war was just beginning. Ender trolled that guy. Ender trolled that guy. We've had our disappointments in the past, hanging on for years, hoping they'll pull through, and then they don't. Nice thing about Ender, he's determined to ice within the first 6 months. Oh. You don't see what is going on here. He's stuck at the Giants' drink in the mid-game, in the mind game. Is the boy suicidal? You never mentioned it. Everybody gets the Giant sometime. But Ender won't leave it alone. Like Pinuel. Everybody looks like Pinuel one time or another. But he is the only one who got himself killed. Don't think it had anything to do with the Giants' drink. You're betting my life on that. And look at what he's done with his launch group. Wasn't his fault, you know. I don't care, his fault or not. He's poisoning that group. They're supposed to bond, and right now, well, where he stands is a chasm mile wide. I don't plan to leave him there very long anyway. Then you better plan again. That launch is sick, and he's the source of the disease. He stays till it's cured. I was the source of the disease. I was isolating him, and it worked. Give him time with the group to see what he does with it. We don't have time. We don't have time to rush too fast. With a kid who has a chance of being a monster as much as a military genius. Is that an order? The recorder's on. It's always on. Your ass is covered. Go to hell. If it's an order, then I'll... It's an order. Hold him where he is until we see how he handles things in this launch group. Graf, you give me ulcers. You don't have ulcers. If you wouldn't have ulcers if you'd lead the school to me and take care of the fleet yourself. The fleet is looking for a battle commander. There's nothing to take care of until you get me that. They filed clumsily into the battle room, like children in a swimming pool for the first time, clinging to the handhelds along the side. No gravity was frightening. Okay, fine. We're out of exposition zone. 55 pages out of exposition zone. 55 out of 330 pages we got out of exposition zone. No more exposition. No more exposition. No more exposition zone. No more exposition. No more acquisitions. No more acquisition. No more acquisition. Alright. No more acquisitions. No more acquisition. No, that's stupid. No more acquisition. No exposition time. They filed clumsily into the battle room, like children in a swimming pool for their first time, clinging to the handholds along the side. Null gravity was frightening, disorienting. They soon found that things went better if they didn't use their feet at all. Worse, the suits were confining. It was harder to make precise movements since the suits been just a bit slower, resisting a bit more than any clothing they had ever worn before. Ender gripped the handhold and flexed his knees. He noticed that along the sluggishness, the suit had an amplifying effect on the movement. It was hard to get them started, but the suit's legs kept moving, and strongly. After his muscles stopped, give him a push this strong, and the suit pushes with twice the force. It'll be clumsy for a while. Better get started. So, still pushing the handheld, he pushed off strongly with his feet. Instantly, he flipped around, his feet flying over his head, and landed flat on his back against the wall. The rebound was stronger, it seemed, and his hands tore loose from the handheld. He flew across the battle room, tumbling over and over. For a sickening moment, he tried to retain his old up and down orientation, his body attempting to right itself, searching for the gravity that wasn't there. Then he forced himself to change his view. He was hurtling toward a wall, but that was down. At once, he had control of himself. He wasn't flying, he was falling. And this was a dive. He could choose how he would hit the surface. I'm going too fast to catch that hold and stay, but I can soften the impact. If I can fly off at an angle, if I roll when I hit and I use my feet. It didn't work all the way as he had planned. He went off at an angle, but it was not the one he had predicted. Nor did he have time to consider. He hit another wall, but this time too soon to have been prepared for it. But quite accidentally, he had discovered a way to use his feet to control the rebound angle. He was now soaring across the room again, towards the other boys, who had clung to the wall. This time, he had slowed enough to be able to grip a rung. He was at a crazy angle in reflection with the other boys, but once again, his orientation had changed. As far as he could tell, they were all lying on the floor, not hanging on the wall, and there was no upside down, and he was no more upside down than they were. What are you trying to do? Kill yourself? Asked Shin. Try it, said Ender. The suit keeps you from hurting yourself, and you can control your bouncing with your legs like this. He approximated the movement he had made. Shin shook his head. He wasn't trying any fool stunt like that. But one boy did take off, not as fast as Ender had, because he didn't begin with a flip, but fast enough. Ender didn't even have to see his face to know it was Bernard. And right after him, Bernard's best friend, Alai. Ender watched them from across the huge room, Bernard struggling to orient himself in the direction, he thought, of the floor. Alai surrendering to the movement and preparing to rebound from the wall. No wonder Bernard broke his arm in the shuttle, Ender thought. He tightens up when he's flying. He panics. Ender stored the information away for further reference. Another bit of information, too. Eli did not push off in the same direction as Bernard. He aimed for a corner of the room. Their paths diverged more and more as they flew, and where Bernard made a clumsy, crunchy landing and bounce on the wall, Eli did a glancing triple bounce on 3 surfaces near the corner and left him most of his speed and sent him flying at a surprising angle. Eli shouted and whooped, and so did the boys watching him. Some of them forgot they were weightless and let go of the wall to clap their hands. Now they drifted lazily in many directions, waving their arms, trying to swim. Now, what's a problem, thought Ender. What if you catch yourself drifting? There's no way to push off. He was tempted to set himself adrift and try to solve the problem by trial and error, but he could see the others, their useless efforts at control, and he didn't think of what he could do, and he couldn't think of what he could do that they weren't already doing. Holding onto the floor with his one hand, he fiddled idly with a toy gun that was attached to the suit in front, just below the shoulder. Then he remembered the hand rockets sometimes used by Marines when they did a boarding assault on enemy stations. He pulled the gun from his suit and examined it. He pushed all the buttons back in the room, but the gun did nothing there. Maybe here in the battle room, it did work. There were no instructions on it, no labels on the controls. The trigger was obvious. He had toy guns, all children had, almost since infancy. There were 2 buttons that his thumb could easily reach, and several others along the bottom of the shaft were almost inaccessible without using 2 hands. Obviously, the buttons near his thumb were meant to be instantly usable. He aimed the gun at the floor and pulled back the trigger. He felt the gun grow instantly warm, and then he let go of the trigger. It cooled at once. Also, a tiny circle of light appeared on the floor where he was aiming. He thumbed the red button on top of the gun and pulled the trigger again. Same thing. He pushed the white button. It gave a bright flash of light that illuminated a wide area, but not as intensely. The gun was quite cold when the button was pressed. The red button makes it like a laser, but it's not a laser, Dabbit said, while the white button makes it a lamp. Neither will be much help when it comes to maneuvering. So everything depends on how you push off, the course you set when you start. It means you're going to have to get very good at controlling our launches and rebounds. We're all going to end up floating in the middle of nowhere. Ender looked around the room. A few of the boys were drifting close to the walls now, flailing their arms to catch a handhold. Most were bumping each other and laughing. Some other were holding hands and going around in circles. Only a few, like Ender, were calmly holding onto the walls and watching. One of them he saw was Eli. He had ended up on another wall not too far from Ender. On impulse, Ender pushed off and moved quickly towards Eli. Once in the air, he wondered what he would say. Eli was Bernard's best friend. What would Ender have to say to him? Still, there was no changing course now, so he watched straight ahead and practiced making tiny leg and hand movements to control which way he was facing as he drifted. Too late, he realized. He had aimed too well, and he was going not to land near Eli, he was going to hit him. Here, snag my hand, Eli called. Ender held out his hand. Eli took the shock of the impact and helped Ender make a fairly gentle landing against the wall. That's good, said Ender. We have to practice that kind of thing. That's what I thought. Only everybody's turning to butter up there, Eli said. What happens if we get out there together? We should be able to shove each other in opposite directions. Yeah? Okay. It was an admission that all might be all right between them. Is it okay for us to do something together? Ender's answer was to take Eli by the wrist and get ready to push off. Ready? Said Eli. Go. Since they pushed off with different amounts of force, they began to circle each other. Ender made some small hand movements, then shifted a leg. They slowed. They did it again. They stopped orbiting. Now they were drifting evenly. Packed head, Ender, Elias said. It was high praise. Let's push off before we run into that bunch. And then let's meet over in the corner. Ender did not want this bridge in the enemy camp to fail. Last one there saves farts in a milk bottle, Elias said. Then slowly, steadily, they maneuvered until they faced each other, spread-eagled, hand to hand, knee to knee. And then we just scrunch? Asked Eli. I've never done this before, said Ender. They pushed off. It propelled them faster than they had anticipated. Ender ran into a couple of boys and ended up on a wall that he hadn't expected. It took him a moment to reorient and find the corner where he and Eli were to meet. Eli was already headed towards it. Ender plotted a course that would include 2 rebounds to avoid the largest cluster of boys. Ender reached the corner. Eli hooked his arms through 2 adjacent handhelds and was pretending to doze. You win. I want to see your fart collection, Eli said. I stored it in your locker. Didn't you notice? I thought it was in my socks. We don't wear socks anymore. Oh, yeah. A reminder that they were both far from home. It took some time. It took some of the fun out of having mastered a bit of navigation. Ender took his pistol and demonstrated what he had learned about the 2 buttons. What does it do when you aim it at a person? Asked Eli. I don't know. Why don't we find out? Ender shook his head. We might hurt somebody. I mean, why don't we shoot each other in the foot or something? I'm not Bernard. I've never tortured cats for fun. No. It can't be too dangerous, or they wouldn't give us the guns anyway. Well, we're soldiers now. Shoot me in the foot. No, you shoot me. Let's shoot each other. They did. Immediately, Ender felt the leg of the suit grow stiff, immobile at the knee and ankle joints. You frozen? Asked Eli. Stiff as a board. Let's freeze a few, said Eli. Let's have our first war, us against them. They grinned. Ender said, better invite Bernard. Eli cocked an eyebrow. Oh, and Shin? Ender decided Eli was joking. If you didn't hold your... In 20 minutes, everyone in the room was frozen, except Ender, Bernard, Shin, and Eli. The 4 of them sat there whooping and laughing until Dab came in. I see you've learned how to use your equipment, he said. Then he did something to a control in his hand. Everybody drifted slowly toward the wall he was standing on. He went among the frozen boys, touching them and thawing their suits. There was a tumult of complaint when it wasn't fair how Bernard and Eli had shot them all when they weren't ready. Why weren't you ready? Asked Dab. You had your suits just as long as they did. You had just as many minutes flapping around like drunken ducks. Stop moaning and we'll begin. Ender noticed that it was assumed that Bernard and Eli were the leaders of the battle. Well, that was fine. Bernard knew that Ender and Eli had learned to use the guns together, and Ender and Eli were friends. Now others might believe Ender had joined his group, but it wasn't so. Ender had joined a new group, Eli's group. Bernard had joined it too. It wasn't obvious to everyone. Bernard was still blustered and sent his cronies on errands, but Eli now moved freely through the whole room. And when Bernard was crazy, Eli could joke a little and calm him down. When it came time to choose their launch leader, Eli was almost the unanimous choice. Bernard skulked for a few days, and then he was fine. And everyone settled in the new pattern. The launch was no longer divided into Bernard's in-group and Ender's outcasts. Eli was the bridge.